Yeah, we're like, Patricia, I think you're on mute.
Okay, now. We're live now? Manny, you broadcasted it?
Okay. I don't see the feature anymore, to be frank.
No, neither do I.
So I believe we're live.
Yes, we are. Okay, so let's just give them a few minutes. In that way we can start. Okay, so far we have 13 attendees. Okay, we will be starting in about two minutes.
By the way, while we're waiting, we have a meeting next Wednesday also for the Resiliency Committee. So John and I will both be there. I'll be there in person. My first trip in 13 months, for perspective.
And Mike, I believe that is from 3 to 5 p.m.
Yes, 3 to 5 p.m. at City Hall over there on the bay.
Yes.
And while we're waiting, go ahead, sorry, Sandra.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, should we start now? And then if Commissioner Watson and Commissioner Russell joins us later, we can go back and introduce them?
I would recommend that, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So then we are going to start the meeting. Good evening and welcome to the City of Miami Stormwater Master Plan Update Community Meeting. It's taking place today, Thursday, April 29th, 2021. My name is Patricia Pocasangre, and I am the Community Outreach and Engagement Coordinator for the Office of Capital Improvements, OCI. We at the City of Miami are very happy to be hosting this virtual meeting for you. This is a sunshine meeting, so any city staff members attending are reminded to not communicate with each other via chat, message, or telephone regarding the content of this meeting, as it is a violation of the Florida Sunshine Law. All conversations are to happen within this meeting. Additionally, this meeting is being recorded. With that, we're ready to begin. Mr. Hector Badia, Director of the Office of Capital Improvements, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Welcome to this meeting. This is the second in a series of 4 meetings presenting our comprehensive stormwater master plan. This particular meeting is to cover the areas of Edgewater, Venetian Isles, East Side, Little Haiti, Overtown, Model City, and Wynwood. Our team has been working very diligently in putting together the stormwater master plan, and we're going to present to you the recommendations and results of this plan. So with that being said, I will release the floor to Mr. Dodd, our Chief Resiliency Officer.
Thank you, everybody, for joining today. And I know that we have 2 commissioners who may be participating later on it, and we'll definitely want to hear from them. But I'd like to thank all of you for participating today. As you know, resilience is a very important topic in the city of Miami, and one of our biggest efforts in trying to be a more resilient city is dealing with flooding and climate change. And the plan that will be presented to you today is the result of more than 2 years of hard work by a lot of people to really try to holistically look at the city, look at the type of rainfall patterns that we're having now, how the city has evolved over the last 100 years, and what the future will look like so that we can build smart infrastructure to reduce our risk from flooding and help to improve the quality of our neighborhoods, our communities, and Biscayne Bay. So it has an environmental quality aspect to it. It has a definite quality of life aspect when it deals with flooding, and a emergency preparedness aspect when it comes to how to deal with those heavy rainstorms. So thank you for listening. It's a lot of information that will be presented. Our team from CDM Smith that has put this together really has done an excellent job trying to replicate the city and help us to come up with some good recommendations that we'll go through. Ultimately, these recommendations will be presented to the City Commission. And as you know, we have the Miami Forever Bond and other pots of money that will be able to start building infrastructure and start down the path to a more resilient city. And that will be very key. But the first step is understanding the master plan, understanding how it prioritizes requirements, and understanding what it says that we need to do over the next 20 to 30 years. So with that, I would like to pass it over to Mike Schmidt, who is going to begin the presentation. And before we do that, I just want to verify that neither of the commissioners have. Commissioner
Russell is we need to promote him to.
Okay, sure.
Oh, okay. Okay. And Commissioner Russell, the floor is yours.
Hi, Alan. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for putting this together. It's really important that the community understands when we're making massive investments that'll lead to massive construction and possibly disruption, why we're doing it and how important it is. The Stormwater Master Plan is something that's been in the works for years now. And when these sorts of things are underground with regard to pipes, it's not really something that we think about a lot, and it doesn't get a lot of attention. But gosh, it's important in the world of resilience when it comes to storms, and not just at the water's edge. Communities are at risk inland, even on the ridge. Our LiDAR maps of the city have shown that we can have flooding in so many places if our stormwater system is not purging that water from the streets and shedding it appropriately. So I'm really appreciative that the administration has taken this very seriously. From our part as electeds, we are very proud to help fund and budget and seek this sort of planning. And it's finally here. So it's perfect timing where the whole country is looking to do massive infrastructure projects. The city of Miami is already working on it. And I'm just very, very thankful to the administration, Hector and Alan and the entire teams for taking this on and making sure that the community is very aware of what they're looking at. So good luck and congratulations.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And with that, now let's turn it over to Mike Schmidt.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Ellen, and everyone. This is Mike Schmidt with CDM Smith. Thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of our team. I'll be tag teaming with John Goldman. Hopefully, are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
The test of the emergency broadcast system. So for the agenda, we'll talk about goals, the constraints, the opportunities, make lemons out of lemonade, or lemonade out of lemons, sorry. Phases, the existing conditions and what we call levels of service or performance for the system to meet the flood mitigation requirements, to protect the bay for treatment and putting water in the ground to avoid saltwater intrusion. Capital improvements program, more about the bay, sea level rise in the future with resiliency, the costs which are significant, and next steps. So the mission, very importantly, is to consider the myriad of goals that we've heard from you, the citizens, from the commissioners, and discuss with your staff. To protect against flooding, rainfall and tides, to protect water quality in the bay itself, to regulate land use now and in the future, and how do you change and adapt over time. While you look at sea level rise, which is happening, greater tidal surges from the events such as Irma and those others that come up in your system, the king tides that go into the streets, looking at resilient features to address that, they're green and gray. managing saltwater intrusion to protect your groundwater supplies and reduce the impacts on those. And the changes in groundwater levels, which then over time will change the types of systems that will protect you from flooding. And how do you regulate that on time and encourage people to move forward with you in the future? So we worked with the team to define those goals to achieve the mission and also metrics for success, looking ahead to the end point. Where do you want to be in 50 to 70 years? There's a 50-year plan at point, but the good news, the things you're implementing can last longer. And so we'll see as you adapt into the future to be resilient and sustainable as possible. So controlling flooding, protecting water quality, building public amenities within your parks, along the bay, along the rivers. The coastal resilience barriers can be public amenities with trails and other public park amenities. Operation and maintenance, there's a lot of stuff that gets in the pipes. And so there's things that can be done, one, to keep it out of there, and two, to clean them out to get immediate success. The capital improvements program, which is significant, but also, as the commissioner said, will be disruptive. It's going to change a lot of streets. So the phasing of that to make sure that it's happening properly and can be done in a reasonable time is important, and addressing those sea level rise and surge issues. So the issues and constraints, you know these. You have, very importantly, Biscayne Bay. It's why many people are in Miami, the enjoyment, the beauty of the bay. Relatively flat terrain. There's closed depressions where stormwater is trapped. The water table can rise quickly. The good news, you sit on one of the most conductive aquifers in the world in terms of being able to discharge stormwater into the ground safely, but also it rises because it is very conductive. It moves water quickly. High impervious, low-lying areas, increasing tides. The system has some locations which are older, and we'll look at that for maintenance, as I said. There's flow interconnecting, water, stormwater does not know boundaries. So between the city, Miami-Dade County, Coral Gables, and other communities, South Florida Water Management District with their canals, DOT with their major systems that run through, coordinated efforts to implement will be important. And this is all there for everyone to see how they can help in the solution, as well as you, individual citizens, for onset opportunities to catch your stormwater and water your plants, which helps to reduce the water you use from the ground for irrigation, but also the nutrients go along for the ride. So it also helps with the bay. So that's very important. So we look at these metrics for protection, for levels of service. So for flood control, how well a system operates or keeps water out of homes and buildings, keeps your roads passable, for emergency traffic, for police, fire, ambulance, and evacuation. And we also know that in Florida it can rain quite hard. So therefore, it's expected water will be in the gutters, into the streets. So we look to try to keep it below the crown. So when you need those emergency conditions, you can drive at least one lane. We look at different storms, rainfall levels. For example, 10.5 inches is the standard we'll be looking at and have done, as well as 7 inches for looking at those areas where you might safe, shallow, short duration ponding may be okay and does not disrupt those emergency issues or accesses, but also keeps out of homes and buildings. So that balance of cost with the benefit is important. And we also have analyzed that. So as I said, looking at no flooding of crowns for the 10-year storm, that's significant. As you can see, many of us have experienced this before where it rains maybe less than that and it happens. So, there may be a variety of reasons for that. The pipe system can need to be upgraded, it could be maintenance, et cetera. So we cover that. The secondary goal, as I said, is the 5-year storm to look at a 7-inch event, which is still quite significant. And so we've balanced that. You'll see 2 alternatives. And the city recognizes that there is that balance. And so the key, of course, is to make sure that public safety is protected at all times. And also importantly, you can't just move the water to downstream. You can't just pump it over there or put a bigger pipe to another location there to the Miami River, because it will move downstream and it can cause flooding. So we've worked to make sure that each project can stand on its own, does not cause downstream problems, and meets your goal for flood control, water quality protection for the bay, and puts water in the ground as possible and works within your streets. So the process itself is the next stage, and I'll turn it over to John Goldman, who will step through the process and the data that we use to develop the stormwater tools.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everybody. It's John Goldman. I'm the project manager for the Stormwater Master Plan for CDM Smith. Let's start with, what did our Stormwater Master Plan accomplish? We did it in 5 phases: data collection and evaluation phase, flooding and water quality modeling phase, infrastructure recommendations, policy and guidance and standards, and of course, tools and training for your staff. So we established some comprehensive program goals. We created a brand new stormwater asset geodatabase in your GIS. We developed a prioritized CIP list of the desired level of service and meets your funding, provided guidance with those future policies. And like we said, we updated those stormwater design standards. Can I get the next slide? Thank you. So in the data evaluation phase, what kind of data went in there? Well, we have about 33,000 plan sheets of stormwater drainage systems citywide, 2,500 archived paper plans and documents. And we were out in the field for field survey verifications where one plan didn't match the other. We'll get all the stormwater structures, getting those critical building finished floor elevations, getting canal cross sections, seawall elevations where you have no seawalls or you have existing seawalls, getting land topography and getting the evacuation routes. Of course, finding all the outfalls. Next slide. Other things that go into the stormwater model, all this goes into the digital model: South Florida water management, rainfall, design, storm data. This is modeled by intensity and duration and volume of rain, and it goes into the models. Impervious area coverage is how much of your area is paved versus how much is grass or green. Digital LiDAR, which is fancy for topography. Soils and groundwater data, how fast does it infiltrate into the ground? How does it work when the groundwater comes up? Canals and pump stations and control gates, which all are at your boundary conditions, and those kind of regulate how fast the water flows off the land. And remember, stormwater does not end at the city limits. Jurisdictional boundaries aren't part of stormwater. So we had to take the model out further into Dade County and to other cities and coordinate with the county models that exist to make sure that we're accounting for flows that currently flow through the city and must be maintained. We've got seawall and shoreline data. And of course, we had our repetitive loss and flood elevation data and some critical structure finished floors. Hit next. So this is what it looks like now. In the left is a picture of what you had, the archived paper with handwritten notes and other things. And on the right is a picture of what we used to create the models. It's a new modern GIS system. You can just click on this and the data will come up. It's constantly being refined as the new projects go in. It'll be entered in here. So this information will now be available for all in one single source electronically. Go ahead. We also had a public outreach campaign. And this was very important because we used crowdsourced data solicitation. We went to each commission district, each area, and we brought maps and we said, where are your flooding problems? We want to listen to you because we want to know where the worst flooding is according to the citizens and residents who live here. So we had these resident neighborhood flooding workshops and we gathered all sorts of data, which we were able to bring into our model and compare what our model is saying versus where your flooding is. And the more data we got, the more refined the model became down to the neighborhood and street level. We also had resiliency committee workshops and industry experts workshops. We had educational blogs and of course some web content so that everybody knew when we talked about sea level rise and flooding and seawalls and protection of Biscayne Bay and storm surge, these became common words because public involvement and education do lead to public acceptance. Go ahead. So this is what we came up with on our problem areas identification. This is where we use the resident flooding problem workshops, some FEMA repetitive loss data, County 311 data, and of course, media coverage every time a large storm came in or even an afternoon storm where there were problems. All these red dots here and all the blue dots represent the green ones, represent different types of data that we acquired over all of the data gathering for where it was flooding. And all of this went into the model under comparison for existing conditions. And on the right here, you see how we compared some of those to where the FEMA flood elevations are. And you can see it goes along the Miami River in the riverine areas, and they all correlated fairly well. So now we knew where the clusters of problems were. So now I'll turn back to Mike and we'll talk a little bit about the actual stormwater model itself.
Mike, this is Patricia. Sorry to interrupt very quickly. I just wanted to bring up to the audience that we have a Q&A session. So if they have any questions as the presentation is being presented, to please type their questions and then we will be addressing those at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Very good, Sandra. Thank you. Thank you. So In the process of the evaluation, we developed computer tools which help us understand the rainfall, runoff, and where it floods, and the quality too. We used a public domain tool from US EPA, the Stormwater Management Model, very appropriately named, that everyone can use. You can hand this for free to all the engineers, developers. We've already given it to at least one university in town. It analyzes all the major basins that contribute flow to the system, including the South Florida major canals and structures. It works with the Miami-Dade County models and takes flows from those as well. Considered all of those peripheral systems, as John and I mentioned. It already has included the 20 ongoing capital projects, and we verified it to actual storm events. So the key, of course, with any tool, with anything, trust but verify, right? So we look to see what happens when it rains. And off here to the right, you see conditions where there's actual flooding and model predictions in different intersections across the city where we can show that the depth is about right. So we've looked at the tides, we looked at the rainfall, how they interact, and it gives us guidance in terms of seawalls, backflow prevention, and the other green solutions that we'll be presenting. So here's a couple more of those. And we also look, in addition to the rainstorms, at 2 sea level rise conditions in the future, 18 inches and 30 inches. We've learned that in time, as the Southeast Florida Climate Compact is identified, and NOAA as well with the Corps of Engineers, there's a wide range of potential changes that can happen in the future. So we looked at finite depths, which then we know will be within those windows of time for your 50-year planning horizon to make sure that you're addressing the worst potential conditions that can occur. So as I said earlier, a lot of imperviousness, a lack of systems, some places are built too low and some roads and homes are too low. Limited amount of pumping, but with that said, pumping to the bay is not the best solution to protect the bay. So a lot of the pumping we're proposing will actually be down into the aquifer, into the ground to reduce saltwater intrusion, and only pumping what we must. I'll talk about momentarily. Keeping up with your systems, helping people to not throw things into the systems, yard debris. It's amazing what you'll find in storm drains. Bricks, concrete, baby diapers, engine blocks, you name it, we've seen it. And then of course, managing the seawalls, 90 miles or so of seawalls, largely privately owned, that may be required. So a lot to do there, but we're giving the guidance to achieve that. So the key is collect water up in the higher areas so it doesn't get down into those closed depressions with exfiltration systems and recharge wells where we can put them. Exfiltration, by the way, in the streets is like a 7-for-1 coupon because it collects, stores, treats, infiltrates water for the best cost within your right-of-way. And it can eliminate some of the peripheral impact for construction. So it does a lot of things that are very valuable to achieve all your goals while protecting the bay. Connect the projects with pipes where you need them. Sometimes the pump stations at first go to force main wells, and then secondly, go as necessary to the bay. We're trying to maintain the pre-development, the current condition volume that's discharged to the bay while reducing the pollution by treating, it's gonna be over 1 inch of the total runoff over the city. So that's very important. And that it creates storage and flow capacity, but very importantly, protects your homes and allows the emergency traffic to drive during those design storm conditions and high tech conditions. Additionally, you have 486 outfalls. City's already ongoing in terms of putting in backflow preventers. This is one older example, but there are more modern smart valves and things coming online. So the city's looking at different technologies to prevent the backflow, but allow water to go out during those normal dry times as well. And then coastal armoring with green and gray options in different types of barriers. So for the flooding itself, to project what happens now, and then how do we solve or mitigate those flooding issues in the future, this map on the left shows with the blue different levels of flood depth. So the darker the blue, the deeper the water. And as you can appreciate, and we went through the communities, we also took their dots, as John showed earlier, the 311 files, your dots from the meetings, and they correlated with that in the FEMA floodplains. It's kind of a triple check. Then implementing exfiltration over 200 miles in some cases, approaching 300 miles. It's in a lot of streets. With many gravity wells, this shows 80 here, but that's one example case, but it could be up to 800, for example. And then also the recharge wells that are pumped. We mitigate these flooding issues, so you see the blue that largely turns to just small pockets of blue for the 10-year storm. And then because this is a significant cost, it's approximately $5.4 billion, which I'll come to in a moment. We looked at another level of service, a 5-year, which came very close for $3.8 billion. So we did look at the benefit versus cost, which importantly can, one, guide you for the best buy solution over time. And secondly, very importantly, set the stage for grant funding opportunities and cooperative efforts with other entities, such as FEMA, the Water Management District, DEP, the New Florida Grant Program, and others. So for water quality, as I mentioned, we're providing over 1 inch of treatment for the entire area, basically through the exfiltration and wells to protect the bay. As we know, the bay is one, an outstanding Florida water, and secondly, has impairments. And we've seen fish kills and things, and so that's important to reduce those loads. And also, very importantly, too, temperature affects the bay. So all these exfiltration systems not only catch the pollution, but the hottest water that comes off the streets in the summertime, which can have great impact on the manatees, on seagrasses, and the related systems in the water. So we're looking at also managing the amount of flow, not just moving it downstream. So no impact to flooding downstream in the canal levels. So meeting those South Florida requirements and making sure that we meet, importantly, your goals. So these green features coordinate between your stormwater systems and the coast. We've identified opportunities for collaboration. We'll also give guidance for public and private partnerships. So how can you do green infrastructure on lots? How can you catch the runoff from the new development and be part of the solution? Also then, as I mentioned, I've been going through these are the different components. As you move down through it, there's a lot that I've talked about, exfiltration, recharge, stormwater parks, and coastal features. So the plan is to green it up as we can and try to implement in a phased approach. So in terms of looking toward the benefit cost, we analyzed a series of alternatives, 1 and 2, as we mentioned, also with 2 sea level rise alternatives. The costs I mentioned are significant. They range in these two from $3.8 to $5.1 billion. Here's the value though. So the value opportunity is that using a FEMA tool called the Hazard US model, it's a standard tool, HAZUS, we looked at the benefit to cost ratio. Above 1 and above is considered a beneficial project. The ratios we show under all scenarios are at between 2.8 to 3.8 to 1. So nearly 3 or 4 to 1 value as shown here by the bar charts on the right side, indicating that for every dollar you spend, you're avoiding between $3 to $4 of flood damages. And that's not considering all the social impacts and the economic lost opportunity. That's simply the flood damage of water in buildings and flooding the roads. So this is a very good investment to demonstrate to FEMA and other entities that this is a solid solution now and in the future to achieve these goals in a cost-effective way. So how will sea level rise affect the system? As you saw, it will, but also as you saw, you still have a very good benefit cost ratio in the future. So we took the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Compact information. These red lines show 18 and 30 inches respectively above the 2020 levels. It's a little compressed here on the screen, but it shows the band. So depending upon which part of the curve you're looking at, this gets you from 2050 through 2080, 2070-ish, 50-year plan basically, which is what the goal was. What can we do over a 50-year planning horizon to identify options? Now, the beauty of the solutions is they can go beyond this and the alternatives are not exclusive. So alternative 1 and 2, you don't have to choose. There's features in each that could be implemented in a phased manner to further the benefits into the future. So there's a lot of flexibility, adaptability in the program. But yes, there will be continued effects of sea level rise. The backflow preventers will be required to reduce that. and protect for the rising ground. So here are the maps. You saw those. This looks at the sea level rise effect. So previously we looked at the water with Alt 1 and Alt 2, these levels. They're a little bit higher than they were without sea level, but they're still manageable and largely contained within certain corridors where you have adaptable options to implement into the future. So with that, I'll turn it back to John, who will present the project areas in more details.
Thanks, Mike. So let's talk a little bit about what factors were considered for the first project areas. A high number of flooding complaints, highly visible areas with repetitive problems, areas for known capacity shortfalls, which were already on the city's priority list for action, spreading the projects throughout the city area in accordance with the guiding theme of your Miami Forever bond, taking advantage of the opportunities for coordination with private development and other city projects that may be going in, and also attaining several quick level of service improvements with measurable results for readily solvable flooding issues, so you can see some results early on. And of course, flexibility in all the projects so they can be easily subphased, remain with any funding parameters or remaining bond capacity that you have. And there were some that were selected of slightly less complex design and permitting to take advantage of that potential stimulus from the federal government that may be coming. You want to be shovel ready when there's grant funding or potential stimulus coming. Go ahead, Mike. You do the next. So our initial stormwater project areas, there were several in each district. In District 1, Melrose, and District 2, Morningside, Brickell Business, go on back. Brickell Business District and Edgewater. And then Latin Quarter in District 3, South Shenandoah. In District 3, Riverside, Jose Marti Park neighborhood in District 3. District 4, Coral Gate and La Pastorita, and District 5, South Shorecrest, and what was really called North Shorecrest is near 84th Street stormwater improvements. And the important thing to remember here is that we looked at the city holistically, and all of the improvements build upon one another. So if you don't see something in your particular neighborhood, it might not be that you're not a priority, but maybe the root cause of your flooding is coming from other areas that we need to solve first to stop the water from coming into your neighborhood and letting those areas have their existing systems cleared capacity and work more effectively. So there is a synergistic thing that's going on here as far as how these projects are staged. They're very flexible. And in parallel, we're also working with the city to solve individual areas of flooding on the intersection level where some problems and nuisance flooding has been happening in certain streets that are not on a citywide scale. So that'll be happening as well in parallel. Go ahead. So where do we go from there? What are some of the future criteria for phase projects? Again, highly visible, repeated flooding conditions, areas slated by the city for previous flooding improvements, standalone areas of citywide flooding that are resolvable or partially attenuated by impactful exfiltration systems. These are rapidly designed, permitted, and constructed and can go in quickly and provide relief not only to that area, but then to other areas, because as the water infiltrates into the ground, it's coming out of the existing system and the other systems begin to work better. Then moving on to interconnected areas of the flooding along the Miami River, Wagner Creek, Little River, and those are in the FEMA flood zones. And then some areas of repeated flooding along the coastal shorelines. And of course, you want to keep in mind that areas containing the shared downstream infrastructure that's required to be in place before the upstream improvements can be installed should go in first. If you need a pump station, it does no good to put in all the pipes upstream unless they moved because of some other priority that was pushing. Okay, Mike? So some of the factors that determine the priority and shuffling of future phases, and this will be changing, and it's a very flexible program. Of course, number one, funding or grant and loan availability. That will dictate really the size of the projects you can do and where you're going to go next. Coordination with other utility and roadway work. DOT is coming in, said, I'm doing this roadway in the next 3 years, and then there's going to be a 5-year moratorium and nothing else goes in. Well, that becomes a new priority. You want to get your stormwater in that first. Public-private partnerships, private development, developer comes in, wants to put in something, it happens to be where a stormwater pump station or some other infrastructure is going in, that becomes the priority. Let the developer work with the city and put all of those programs in first. Environmental permitting requirements, NPDES or MS4 program. If pollution gets bad in an area and that becomes your priority because you want to solve that, then those can move forward. There are also some that will move them backward, like design and permitting constraints and project execution period. If a project is starting to run into hurdles because of trying to find a route for a force main or trying to buy a piece of land for a pump station and it's not happening, those can move back slightly. And of course, very importantly, the new seawall program is going to put in these seawalls to keep the sea out. At the same time, if there was no seawall there, which there isn't in many places, it will trap the stormwater in. So that needs to be coordinated so you don't cause flooding by putting in a seawall where there was none before. So that would become a priority and move up as well. Go ahead. So this is how it looks for the rest of the city. And we have them grouped. The red projects is what you saw, and those hopefully will be within 5 years. You're spending between $3 to $5 million in a 20-year CIP, and that's the program. So the next group is the yellow group. As you see, there's some in the south, some through the central, and some in the north there. Those will hopefully be in within 10 years. And then the green will come next within 15 years. And then we have these areas in the group 4, which rely on a lot of other improvements going in. The further you go west, there are no canals and areas out there where you can simply pump water to. You have to pump them very far east. And the other part of that is you have to lower stages in the canals and other places before this new water can be released. So this really lends itself towards starting discussions for regional solutions. And what we mean by that is working with Broward County, working with the South Florida Water Management District to try to find solutions for these areas that would benefit other cities that are out there, unincorporated Miami-Dade County, or other South Florida Water Management District areas, so that we can get a regional solution and try to help these areas in an earlier manner. Go ahead. So this is those areas we're talking about. There are some areas that we could do immediately out in this area. These are complex, larger lead time projects out in Flagami and Lejeune Gardens, and there's a flood problem out there. Those elevations are down near 3, and they're in the bottom of the bowl. So these are areas that need to have large pumps and other things happen first. So we try to work in the areas around it, try to capture things uphill and make those a little bit less while we're looking for those regional solutions. Go ahead. What are our next steps? So for the stormwater program itself, there's some training coming up for the city staff so they can start looking at what if situations and doing modeling by themselves. Public outreach continuation, very important meetings with the regulators. So the plan is to have a citywide conceptual environmental resource permit application and address any regulatory responses. The first couple projects may go out piecemeal, and as the permits go in, the regulators, after seeing several of these, will say, what is the large plan that is happening? How does this all work together? So if you can get the conceptual permit done ahead of time, the regulators will simply look at the master plan, compare each one of these small projects to it, say, yes, that conforms to what we're doing, and they'll be very easily permitted. Of course, next is the funding plan for the next phases of your CIP, and there's a community-wide conversation around funding for that needs to happen, and looking at different priorities. And then next is the CIP implementation. There's an immediate action plan in the Stormwater Master Plan that it consists of cleaning of that existing system and getting the seawall program and the backflow preventers and existing stormwater pump station upgrades and things that you can do to your existing system so you can get the original capacity, design capacity of what you have back. And that'll take care of a lot of these areas which are having problems in the regular afternoon thunderstorms. And then the initial CIP implementation, which were those red group projects, and then begin those regional solution discussions for those ones in the far west, and then start to implement group 2, 3, and 4, and coordinate how those are going to go in and what influencing factors are going to say what has to go first. Building code and land use modification discussions. This includes, are we going to have a finished floor elevation that has the future sea level rise incorporated in it? So buildings now are going to be raised, and the new buildings will have a finished floor higher, or even have that sacrificial first floor where the real first floor is the second floor, so that in the future, if the sea level rises to the expected values, then that would be something where you won't have to adjust those buildings as much. All right, I'll turn it back over to the city for some closing comments.
Yes, This is Patricia again, and we are how to stay in touch with us. There are several ways, as you can see here on the screen. The first one, you can call us at 305-416-1280. You can also send an email to askoci@miamigov.com. This is very important because if you have any questions in the future, or if you would like to have your email added to our database so we can keep you updated on any progress regarding the Stormwater Master Plan, just send us an email here, askoci@miamigov.com, and we will add you to the database only for a Stormwater Master Plan related issues. Additionally, you can also visit the Stormwater Master Plan webpage at our OCI website. And Ms. Maya Holton is going to guide you through right now to navigate how to get the best out of our webpage. Also, I was looking at the Q&As, and many of you were complaining, were just letting us know that the maps were too small to view. Maya is going to show you how we have all these maps in the in our webpage and as PDF files. So you will be able to enlarge the images and to really see exactly what Mike and John have been talking about, at the convenience in your house. So let me now pass it on to Maya. And Maya, if you could please show us the webpage, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to just quickly show you how you can access the Stormwater Master Plan webpage from the main City of Miami website. So starting out on the city's main webpage, there will be a search bar right at the top. You can just go ahead and type in Stormwater. And immediately you'll see the Stormwater Master Plan webpage. Go ahead and click that. And here you'll find an overview of the Stormwater Master Plan and also supporting documents that Patricia was mentioning earlier, executive summary, also comprehensive citywide Stormwater Master Plan final report, as well as the comprehensive citywide Stormwater Master Plan Appendix A Stormwater Model Verification. These two files are large files, so you will see that they're broken up into part one and part two. As you scroll down, you'll see different tabs that also offer more information about the Stormwater Master Plan, what it is, challenges facing Miami, and most importantly, here you have your events tab, which have all of our upcoming and a few of our past meetings. 1 and 2 will be past. Today's the 29th. But you can share this with different people who might live around the city who might want to learn more about what we're doing. If you have any questions, as Patricia mentioned earlier, you can email us at askoci@miamigov.com. And any questions that you have, we'll make sure that we get back to you all and give you any information that you may need. Thank you.
Okay, Alec, I think we're ready for you now.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Maya. And I know that several folks talked again about the maps being a little hard to read. So please head on over to the city's website and you can dive in detail if you'd like. I suggest starting with the executive summary before you get into the 4-part Stormwater Master Plan. We have quite a bit of questions. Maya, if you can stop sharing, we'll
sure.
Get some questions out. So Alan, I see that you're answering a question on the historically, the attention with the aquifers. Would you like to answer that live?
I don't think I was answering that.
Oh, okay. It's all right.
Smith to address.
Sure, certainly. So historically, no attention has been given to the impact of receiving aquifers by utilizing them for stormwater discharge. With the advent of ever-increasing sea level rise and resiliency efforts and the number of wells and stormwater volumes presented, how does CDM anticipate aquifers might be impacted in the immediate and long term?
Yes, that's a very good question. So importantly, we're treating the water first in the exfiltration, and also for the wells, the water is pre-treated to meet that 1-inch requirement So therefore the hottest water is treated, the debris is removed, and the sediments are also removed. Then it goes out for most of the application with exfiltration into the shallow groundwater, whereas a chance to filter in the sand above the Biscayne and along the edge. So we're actually increasing the treatment while distributing the water that's been treated into the aquifer. So this will be putting as clean a water as you can from a stormwater source back, which also will reduce saltwater intrusion, because saltwater intrusion is progressively moving from east to west over time and will with sea level rise, and putting more treated, cleaner, fresh water into the aquifer will help reduce that as well.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder, folks, there's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom box. And so please feel free to type and answer our question and we will begin to answer them. Wonderful. So Deborah asks, will the city be conducting a review of seawalls along the shores and identifying those that might be substandard?
Okay, I guess that one I will take. We have looked at it from a LiDAR point of view, determining elevations, but we are not going out and inspecting every seawall in the city, privately owned and city owned. If there are issues, however, where you have flooding that's occurring because seawater is overtopping the seawall and impacting either the neighbor's property or the public right-of-way, it can then be cited, which then sets off by city ordinance a requirement for the wall to be repaired or replaced. And when it is replaced, to bring it to a higher standard of 6 feet NAVD or 4 feet NAVD if it's along the Miami River, to account for future sea level rise. So in a majority of cases, the process will begin when there's noticed impacts due to overtopping of the seawall.
Thank you, Alan. So what are the timeline on the next steps here?
So Chris, why don't you talk a little bit about the first bond issue, and then we can go into some of the next steps after that.
All right, good evening, everybody. This is Chris Bennett, Assistant Director and Deputy CRO with Resilience and Public Works. So currently what we're working on right now is from those generally highlighted areas that you saw as, we'll just call it the first area that we're focusing on, to identify projects that we can then propose for spending bond funds on. We are looking to socialize those and get commissioner input over the next, basically the next couple of weeks. So that way we can really iron out exactly where the projects should be with their input, and ultimately finalize the scopes and cost estimates for those projects so we can be at or near the funding level that we have left in the bond, with some room to grow depending on grant opportunities that we are actively going after. So I would say we're talking a matter of weeks, not months, for us to propose final scopes and locations for projects to finish expending the bond funds. And then once we obviously get the blessing of the commissioners and the city manager and so forth, we will be then socializing it with the public before we really truly move on and ultimately take them to commission for approval. So we've got a few months until you actually hear the full scope and location of all the projects, but we're actively working on those right now with the intention of talking to our commissioners very soon.
And I would like to point out to everybody that this report was just released last Thursday, and because we understand the urgency of it, we're instead of doing sequential, we're trying to do it all at the same time, talking to the public, talking to the commissioners, elected officials, talking to the other departments, so that we can come to consensus as soon as possible about what to do next. But this is a very free-flowing process. Commissioner Russell is here, and he has been tracking this for a long time, as well as the other commissioners. And there are decisions that will have to be made along the way, but you can't make those decisions until everybody is on the same playing field as far as what the report says and how to use that information to inform those decisions.
Alan, if I could weigh in.
Yes.
Hey, everybody. So Commissioner Ken Russell here. This has been a priority of the commission for a very long time. Before any of the other current commissioners were on the board, I believe it was Frank Carollo who had actually originally made this a priority when I was early in my commission tenure 5 years ago. And it's great to see it coming to fruition now. Funding is going to be the biggest issue. And if I heard right or saw right, we're talking about 3 to 5 billion, not 3 to 5 million. Am I correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's be straightforward with everybody here. The Miami Forever Bond, as huge of an accomplishment as that was to pass by the voters, only has 200 million, not billion, but 200 million in it for stormwater, sea level rise, resilience issues. Another potential source we have now is the American Rescue Plan, recently passed by Congress and President Biden, which will be yielding 70 million to the city of Miami over this next month and another 70 million within the next 12 months. That's our estimate, 140 million. So even there, we're still at only 340 million total, which is 1/10, not even 1/10 at the low edge of what you're talking about we need to address our stormwater problems in the city of Miami. This is a massive need, larger than what we currently have the capacity to budget for. The will is there, but the budget is not. So I would say, as the federal government is now looking at the next massive bill, which is the the next massive bill trying to pass through Congress, which is the infrastructure plan, I'd like to see the city of Miami getting mentioned there, because to have this plan ready means we're ahead of the curve. We've at least already started investing in the planning and design and need. So we are much further shovel ready than maybe other cities when it comes to large infrastructure projects as the federal government tries to fund. So seeking matching dollars, hopefully we would be at the front of the line there if we have the right advocacy. So you can count on me for that, but we're going to need some help. Obviously, this becomes political when you have 5 different districts with 5 different needs and a budget that can't even cover the entire project list as is. So I look forward to talking with my fellow commissioners about this. I'm the one who's been most tuned into it simply because I'm at the waterfront. But as I said early on in the Zoom, this is going to affect every single district. And the big thing you think about is if you could see the LIDAR, the map of our topography, there are bowls, even at the higher elevations. If you're not at sea level, there's areas that just can send water into basically ravines of the community. And so we have major flooding issues, plus the porous limestone that allows for seepage of the water table as it's coming up. So I know that all of my fellow commissioners will be interested in this. They'll all want to see their parts of the community getting a fair share, even in the early projects. So I'll be studying that 5 to 10 year map that you had up there of the go now projects. And I would recommend trying to spread that around, even though we should prioritize need in terms of urgency. I would say politically as well, we want to make sure that we have the whole commission on board. So each of their districts feels they're getting a benefit while all of us are currently still in office over the next few years. And that'll help grease the wheels for positive votes on these budget expenditures. But I would like to know what our plan is to try to find matching funds, because we still at this point do not have even a federal lobbyist helping seek attention for our issues or keeping a track on the funding sources available at the federal level. And that's something I've been advocating for a while. So one question I have for you all is, how are we going to find the matching funds? The other question I have for you is more of a practical side on 2 points. Does the Stormwater Master Plan consider some new practices in terms of permeable asphalt and concrete, for example? I believe there's been new jumps in technology on those sorts of ways to absorb water in our hardscape that are better than what they originally were. And I'm curious if this plan contemplates implementing any of those. And number 2 would have to do with the bay. And I noticed our current at least what you mentioned tonight in terms of trying to mitigate that, is to send as much toward the aquifer as possible versus the bay. But if the city of Miami currently has between 360, 390 stormwater outfalls, our system is meant to expel to the bay. Do we have a filtration process, not only for plastics and sediment, but also chemicals? And I know that's a hard thing to consider and maybe a very expensive thing to consider, but as all these nutrients hit the bay, that's what's causing our algae blooms and fish kills. So if we have to send to the bay, are we doing anything to mitigate the water quality issues that get out there?
Hello, Commissioner. This is Mike Schmidt. I'll answer in the reverse order. The answer is yes for the treatment, for the chemicals. The exfiltration with the soils and the media will take care of many of the nutrients. Some of the dissolved nutrients will go down into the aquifer, into a salty zone, which is already a bit saline to brackish. And we'll keep that out of the bay. 1.1 inches over the entire area is significant for 56 square miles for the city. So that's important. Yes, the bay will feel less pollution load as these projects are implemented, and they can be implemented street by street. They don't have to all be done at one time. Next,
Mike, what does that mean? 1.1 inches. What does that mean?
So that means if the equivalent is if 1 inch of rain fell over the entire city, it all would go into the ground and would not go to the bay. The first inch, and that first inch tends to be the hottest, most concentrated because it washes off the pollutants. And so it's that so-called first flush is the most influential in terms of protecting water quality. So that's a very important step in this process. Secondly, for permeable, the answer is yes. It still could be used in concert with your exfiltration, and that would further your plan. So as time goes on, as people can implement asphalt or permeable concrete or other options, you have the flexibility and adaptability to put in less of pump stations or less of this or that as you look at individual neighborhoods. So the design standards and guidance will help with that. And importantly, coming back to the funding, in my 37 years, this is one of the largest CIPs I've seen. I worked on the original storm drain master plan for the city in 1986 for perspective, right?
Wow.
And so back then, capital improvement plans were $50 million or $100 million. And so yes, 3.8 to 5.4 billion, 20 times your bond seems insurmountable. With that said, you mentioned three potential opportunities: the American Rescue Plan, the infrastructure plan, and some of the other grant programs. Also, FEMA has a new program. So it will take all of these funding sources on deck, so to speak. FEMA's new program is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Plan. It's a proactive plan. You can also plan ahead for sea level rise and future contingencies. Some projects qualify for up to 50 million per year. So that's another stream. Next, there's also, Florida's about to pass of the $100 million per year Coastal Resilience Grant Fund program. So there's state funding coming from there as well. In addition, you've got opportunities for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. Wherever you've had a disaster, Irma and others, where there's some impacts, there's that. FEMA's also looking at another form of the HMGP, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, called HMGP Forward. So maybe two forms of the HMGP program. Next, there's a state revolving fund program, which are low interest loans. I think they're still less than 2 to 3%. So as you get funds from your own stormwater utility, you have the opportunity to then leverage those for the SRF program, and there may be opportunities there. And additionally, EPA, for some of your other facilities, has the WIFIA, the Water Improvement Finance Act. So there's grants and loans that can also leverage. It would not be surprising that the city would need to put all these together and then, of course, phase it in, focusing on the priorities. We're going to be doing some refinement, as we discussed, with District 4. Obviously, you know, the key part of this is to hear from you and the citizens so we know what your priorities are and then can refine them as appropriate, see where to start first, and then implement as possible. Then there's the public-private partnerships and the cooperative partnerships with Miami-Dade County, South Florida Water Management District, FDOT, because FDOT generates a lot of runoff. And so there's opportunities there. Seeking those public-private partnerships and public-private partnerships, John talked about the public-private. It could be that a developer has land and may be able to put in the footprint for a pump station, which offsets a cost, which then helps them get their development without causing an adverse impact. That's where the development guidance comes in. So the good news, there's a lot of opportunities and creative ways to get there. We've seen these be successful before, and although it may seem insurmountable, you have great opportunities to get there.
Thank you, Mike. Whose responsibility in the administration will it be to try to coordinate this funding? Would that be Lillian Blondet, Director of Grants, or will that be from your departments in Capital?
Commissioner, we have been talking with Lillian and the Office of Capital Improvements about all of these different grant opportunities. And now that we have the plan on trying to get shovel-ready projects identified, so as the grants get released to us to apply for them, we have something that we can submit. But Lillian is definitely the key person in making that happen.
Of course. And at the state level that Mike mentioned, what is our specific ask currently of the state appropriations with regard to this matching? What are we trying to find from them?
I do not believe, as far as the Stormwater Master Plan, we had any specific requests other than some smaller projects, because it would have been submitted earlier.
Got it. So this would be for next session, basically, next year's session.
So, yes. However, again, there is this resilience fund that will be coming out. They have to come up with implementing guidance once it's assigned, but we expect that to come down from DEP, and the other sources as well will come down is grant applications that we can then submit for during this year's budget cycle.
Got it. I mean, this is the type of transformational large investment infrastructure project that a governor can help take credit for. So I hope that this is a big part of our application next year and next year's session. Now that we have a plan and a project and a timeline and a budget, this is the type of thing we're clearly going to need their help on.
Yes. And Commissioner, and Alan knows this as well, that this year they're taking 500 million of the, or at least it's proposed, they're going to take $500 million of the stimulus money and put it into the Resilience Trust Fund. So right now there's actually about $600 million this year from the state for resilience infrastructure. So again, waiting on the governor to sign the legislation, sign the budget, and get implementing guidance from DEP, but there at least are fairly significant dollars this year.
And I'd also like to add that, you know, we're going to continue doing what we've been doing, especially the last couple of years, and working very aggressively and hard with, you know, the grants department in order to continue matching it, every dollar we can possibly match, and hopefully doubling and even then some. But even with the hundreds of millions that are out there to help supplement our next 20 to 30 years of capital layout needs, don't forget, there's a few things also. We have one of the lowest, or at least average to below average, stormwater rates currently for stormwater utility, yet we happen to be one of the lowest lying areas in South Florida. And what we currently have now for maintenance needs in our current budget, we're doing pretty well. But as we add 10, 20, 50, 90 pump stations, hundreds of miles of new pipes and wells and so forth, don't forget the maintenance and needs for that too. So we're going to have to definitely start talking about our stormwater rate, which has been low, too low, quite frankly, for a while, and start looking into how we can either restructure and or start raising that. And there may even, the last thing you want to talk about, but there may even have to be some talk about identifying various risk areas and possibly having assessment areas based on their flood risks too. But, you know, that's something to be considered as we start moving forward, because maintenance of all this new system will also be a big cost. I don't know if anybody else has anything else on funding, but to jump to the first part of the question, which was about pervious paving and concretes and so forth. My biggest comment on that is we're definitely going to be implementing as many, we'll just call them green tools in the toolbox as we can. You know, landscaping is the first step to cleaning that first flush that Mike was talking about. So obviously reclaiming swales where we can, and planting as many native plants as possible to help not only absorb the water, which they do great jobs at that, but also filter the water before it gets to the drainage system. Then when it does get to that drainage system, obviously we need more exfiltration and so forth in wells. Now, to reduce the amount of water that gets to the system, which will ultimately reduce the burden or the load, if you will, pervious pavement is definitely an option. However, you need to, much like the way exfiltration trenches are designed, the underground percolation systems we have, you also have to design your pervious paving in areas that make sense. You need to be at a high enough elevation to where that pervious surface and the rock that's underneath it are high enough above the water table, especially during king high tides with the storm surge coming in, to where you're not actually creating a capillary lack of resistance and ultimately flooding the right of way, because now you just opened up the land to allow water to flow backwards. So we will definitely be looking at pervious paving and concretes where we can, but it won't be everywhere in the city because we have to consider the water going both up and down.
All right, well, thank you. We have several other questions. There's one just generally about the challenge with permitting and permitting fees associated with seawalls. If any of you would like to talk about if the city has any plans to kind of work with the county to try and streamline some of the permitting issues and challenges.
Okay. Well, we do not control the county, and I see the question is specifically discussing about DERM and their requirements for bonding and for permitting. We will talk with them and encourage them to assist us. As far as the city permit fees, however, within the ordinance that we just passed, we did put in provisions that if it will cause financial hardships in order to get permits to replace seawalls, we have the ability where we can waive those fees, and there is a process laid out within the ordinance as to how to do that. So we definitely recognize that all the additional fees associated with it makes it harder and harder to replace the seawall when we know it needs to happen. And we did try to accommodate that within those things that the city can directly control.
All right, thank you. This plan will take time to implement. What is being done currently to help mitigate some of the current challenges?
Well, I'll take the first stab and say that, you know, we've done a fairly aggressive job of spending our current CIP funds on what I call spot drainage improvements, in addition to the actual capital projects that we do every year. So we're always executing anywhere from 3 to 6 spot drainage location improvements. It can be anything from a corner on a street in front of somebody's house, or even a whole block. So we're going to continue doing those projects above and beyond what's recommended as basin or neighborhood sized projects coming out of the master plan. And that will always be part of our process, in addition to spot cleaning drainage systems that seem to be clogged, in addition to our regular cleaning of the system as we need to comply with environmental permitting. In addition to that, obviously, as we briefly mentioned, the first round of projects that we're proposing or working on proposing for the remaining bond funds, obviously the goal there is to get those up and running and in construction ASAP. So, you know, we're looking at anywhere around a dozen very large projects coming soon, in addition to our regular, like I said, 3 to 6 projects almost monthly that we're executing all over the city as needed, based on flood concerns and complaints that are historical and received through either the county's 311 system or through our flood reporting tool, which is with IC Change, which is on our website.
Great. All right. Kate asks, over what time is the 3.8 to 5.4 billion in funding needed?
Between 20 and 30 years total. So you're looking at probably an outlay, if you average it smoothly over 20 to 30 years, 100 to 150 a year, every year for a while.
But I think also it's important to recognize that this plan is a 20-year plan, that not everything needs to be built today. And it assumes that there will be incremental changes required as sea level rise occurs and other factors. So, you know, it is developed in recognition of that.
And I'll go back on, just add a little extra piece to the projects that we execute already and we'll continue doing. It was kind of mentioned, I believe it was Mike that mentioned it roughly. We're also working, you know, vigorously with large developments or redevelopments that are going on throughout the city and coming to agreements. I wouldn't call them, you know, private-public partnership type things, but it's basically like that, where we are working with them to come up with sharing either the costs or the land necessary in order to improve our stormwater system too. So don't forget, we're doing some of that stuff in the background as we go, which is also implementing stormwater systems that you may not see currently in the capital plan, because we're working on those with the help of various developments around the city. I forgot to bring that up, sorry.
Great, fairly straightforward. Will the GIS files be available?
There will be a public-facing GIS, I guess you could call it portal to certain files, like for instance, the ability to see the inundation maps based on different rainfall scenarios and depending on which, you know, stormwater capital plan improvement level that we go to. We also plan on having the ability to see the existing stormwater systems in some sort of public-facing GIS realm, which will help with permitting purposes as developers, engineers, and so forth are looking to find where our existing system is to do their design and planning. But right now it's not ready for public consumption. As Alan mentioned earlier, we just got call it the final report, you know, in the last few weeks. So we still have to do the ingestion of the GIS data. We've reviewed it before, but we got to review it again and make sure that it is truly ready for us to use. And then once it's ready for us to use, it will most certainly have the ability for the public to view it in another in GIS format.
Great, we can see Commissioner Russell's friend is excited about stormwater. So is the city looking to discuss this plan with the county and other cities for synergy and perhaps leverage the federal funds on a regional basis? And I'm going to chime in also with if someone can briefly chime in about the Central and Southern Florida flood control system and how that impacts Miami as well.
Okay, so I'll start out the conversation. The day that this report was released, the county asked to get access to it so they could start reviewing it as well. And at the end of the day, our stormwater system overlaps with the county stormwater system and the state stormwater systems in this area. So as we're making our changes, it may also require changes in theirs. And we are definitely trying to synchronize that. The second part on it, what you, Alex, was talking about was, as we are discharging the stormwaters into the canal systems, the Miami River, those are all part of the Central and South Florida water control system that's run by the South Florida Water Management District. And so that is what determines how much water capacity you have in a canal, how much is coming from outside of the city and passing through, and how much capacity has for us to put our water into it. So we are also having to coordinate with them. And in this case, with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, that is re-looking the regulation schedule that determines how much water is put down all of those canals throughout the city. So definitely a local and a regional approach as we're trying to make these changes to make sure that we're not causing negative impacts in one part because of things that we're trying to do to get positive impacts in another.
And just a clarifying question, is the baseline for the first flush 1 inch or 1.5 inches?
This is Mike. Alec, what was the question? Is the first flush is
1 inch or 1.5 inch? I think it was just a clarifying question.
So the overall plan will treat about 1.1 inches over the entire area for the first flush. South Florida water, and it's consistent and generally exceeds the South Florida Water management district requirements.
All right, thank you. So with this plan, you've calculated and factored in, have you calculated and factored maintenance costs of the pollution controls, including the OPEX costs, into the total cost of ownership between Alt 1 and Alt 2? So I guess that kind of have not just the total cost, but is the cost of the operations and maintenance also included in the plan decision?
This is John Goldman. So as Chris alluded to before, the operational costs are obviously going to go up. It's the same components, whether it's Alt 1 or Alt 2, it's just more of them. So it doesn't go up exponentially from one to the other. It's the same components with the same, so they're easily calculatable. And yes, the more infrastructure you have, the more it's going to cost to maintain. So those costs are separate, since they're a separate part of the budget. And those costs for the cleaning of the systems as they go in, and that's something that just has to be done, whether you have 10 miles of it or 20 miles of it. You know, that's going to be an annual cost of the number of different types of cleaning machinery and labor that you have out there. So those costs were not explicitly in the master plan, but they are out there.
Great. And we have a question around the phasing of the project. So specifically around the Venetian Causeway, it has both the bay, has the bay on both sides. Why is it in the third phase of the project? And as the Causeway is a county road, what is the plan? What is the county plan, and how soon will we know exactly what's planned for our neighborhood?
And this is John Goldman, and Tom can chime in here a little bit after I'm done, but you know, we're not trying to keep the county road dry there. This is the neighborhoods of those islands that are within the city of Miami's jurisdictional limits. They have just received the stormwater system and then pump stations and some wells and another outfall. So those areas are somewhat being taken care of. And as far as putting in projects that initially will help solve other projects to get to certain priorities of deeper flooding, the islands are somewhat self-contained. So those were on slightly a longer schedule to implement.
All right, thank you. So fairly straightforward. Can someone answer from the city about, does the city have a federal lobbyist?
I believe that it's something that Commissioner Russell talked about, the need to have a federal lobbyist. And I see he's back on, so I will let him talk more about that.
We don't, and it's very frustrating for me. We've always had Tallahassee lobbyists and good relationships in Tallahassee. We currently have 11 Tallahassee lobbyists. We don't have one federal lobbyist. And the manager in the last meeting, upon pressing him on this, said he's considering one lobbyist that one commissioner had recommended, and another commissioner asked for a pool to be presented to the commission to decide or choose. And so my hope is that they're issuing an RFQ, a request for qualifications, of any federal lobbyists who might be interested in assisting the city of Miami. I mean, for a city of our size to not have representation in DC with all the funding that's available and the laws that could affect us is irresponsible. So we're working on that. We've never had one, but we will this year, I promise. Right, Amisha? Yes. Yes, we will have a lobbyist.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. So this is one about the kind of roadways. So it seems like streets are not being swept as before, and lots of solid trash is left on the roadways for the rain to wash away. So can someone talk about the maintenance and pollution control and street sweeping for the city?
Actually, we've been having a lot of conversations about that recently. As you know, anything that gets on the street is going to get into the catch basins, and it's going to go out to the bay. And that's been a huge issue for us for several years. So we did get approval from the commission, or I should say direction from the commission for a project within the budget to install 1,000 inlet protective devices to prevent pollution from getting into it to begin with in the downtown area. And we're moving forward to award a contract, so those will all be in place by the summer. That'll be one of the first projects to help control pollution. But as we do that, it also made us realize that we need to increase the amount of street sweeping that's occurring and the amount of efforts to collect trash and debris on the street, because otherwise eventually it is going to get into that system. So we're having a greater conversation about where we are doing street sweeping now and where we are not doing it adequately, and how to change it to improve the efficiency and get more of sediments and debris off the street. So that is an ongoing conversation with the solid waste department now.
And it's something that we've been looking into for a while, because we recognize, you know, there's plenty of studies out there, everything from heavy metals to organics, nitrogen loading, and so forth. Street sweeping is by far, dollar for dollar, the best pollution prevention program. So we are going to be working hard on improving that and hopefully increasing it, but at least improving it, especially where debris is most found.
All right, a little bit of a complicated one here. So if community participation is a goal, will the city enable a percentage of funds to go towards local community-led pilots and test beds with institutions that support scaling new methodologies of IoT, CMI, water management, control treatment technologies? So basically, I think, is there opportunities to create pilots around innovative, new technology?
I would say there are opportunities. Of course, we don't have money to give out to everybody and everything, but when organizations have come to us, and I'll bring up the Miami Waterkeeper in particular, about 2 years ago, and they brought up a recommendation for a program for doing greater water sampling testing to help to identify some problems. And the city did agree to participate in that study or that effort that they were doing. So if you have a really great idea that you think could benefit the city and what we're trying to do, I would say send a recommendation either through the administration or to the commissioner's office, and then we can look at it and see if it's something that we do want to participate in.
Great. And our last question for the night is, so basically, has the plan been mapped to the recommendations of the Biscayne Bay Task Force?
Well, fortunately for us, Arella, Mag, and the Magby Group and Brazago have been on the team since the beginning, keeping us informed with all of that. Mike Schmidt keeps on top of all the federal, state regulations and local regulations that we have. We knew the Biscayne Bay was a priority. We had a fish kill in the middle of our study. Of course, we started back in 2017, 2018. So a lot of this, we were breaking new ground here, and new and renewed interest became in the Bay. So we knew that was going to be something we would have to meet. So the answer is indirectly yes. And now we can take these recommendations and continue to look at the recommendations of the Biscayne Bay Task Force and make sure that we're all synergistic and aligned.
Yeah, and I would like to highlight that even though the task force has sunset and now we have a chief bay officer, which is also Irella, as soon as the report came out, she contacted me and she asked, how can we partner on starting to get these implemented as soon as possible? The environmental pieces, the water quality pieces, and she definitely wants to work with the city and the county to help us to deliver these faster.
All right, those are all of the questions we have for tonight. So I will pass it on to you, Alan, to say a few parting words.
No, I would just like to thank everybody for participating today. If you think about how big the city of Miami is, 470,000 plus residents, and the importance that the Stormwater Master Plan has to our future, having you here today, asking tough questions, getting involved, and that now helping us to push these priorities forward is really important. And the fact that you're here today tells me that you believe this is a worthwhile effort and that everything we're doing matters. So I would like to thank you. And I really would like to pass it to Commissioner Russell for final comments tonight.
Thanks, Alan. No, you all have done all the hard work on this. This is a heavy lift to put it in a position now where it can be funded. You've got my commitment to work with the other commissioners and the mayor to make sure that it is, so that you can implement this plan as quickly as possible. So congratulations to everyone that's been working on it, and of course to all the residents for their advocacy.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.